Hi everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to turn your swatches into art. And we are going to make this ocean themed swatch art watercolor card, or you could even use it as a painting. So here is another version that's more plant-based with some greens and lavenders. And here's another garden-based swatch art watercolor card, just using some pretty pastel shades. And then finally, we have this little wintry themed swatch art card. This is actually the first one that I did. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing you're going to do, you can use any size paper that you like here. Just make sure you're using watercolor paper. And then I bought this 1/4 inch painter's tape on Amazon.com. So you definitely need a 1/4 inch or thinner painter's tape in order to do this technique. So I am going to go around all the edges on my watercolor block here, and then I'm going to start making some patterns with the tape so that I get a series of rectangles and squares of all different sizes. And the only thing that I'm certain of is that I want to leave a rectangle in the center to be pretty large, and that's where my focal image is going to go. So that is going to be the only swatch in our painting where we add a focal image to. The rest of the little squares or rectangles, we're just going to have fun with color swatching, and we're going to play around with our watercolors and learn how they move and learn how they work together and try to come up with the colors that we want to use for our little focal panel in the center. So one of the things that I found, I'm pretty new to watercolor, and I found that there is a lot of swatching that is necessary, a lot of planning that you have to do before you start your watercolor pieces. That's a little different from copics. And I'm kind of impatient, so I didn't really want to spend a lot of time just doing swatches ahead of time. And I came up with this idea to kind of turn my swatches into art. So this way I can kind of play around with my swatches on the finished painting. And then based on those swatches, I can kind of decide what colors I want to use in my focal panel. So let's go ahead and get started. I am using the Ocean Blues palette by Daniel Smith watercolor. So it has 6 colors here. This color that I'm mixing up is Cerulean Blue. It's a really, really pretty sky blue shade. And then this color is Sleeping Beauty Turquoise. So it's made of ground up turquoise stones from the Sleeping Beauty mine in Arizona. I think that's kind of cool. And I'm just gonna mix up kind of a darker pigment and then a lighter one. And this color here is Lunar Blue, which is really, really pretty for skies and for clouds. This color that I'm mixing is Indigo. It's a real dark grayish blue. And then this is Sodalite, which is a real beautiful granulating color. It's has gray tones in it. It's made of, I guess, ground up sodalite gems or stones. And then this last color is Payne's Blue Gray, and this is probably one of my most favorite colors. So let's get started. So I'm going to start with that big focal panel, and I'm just going to cover it with some water, and I'm just using, I think, a size 5 or 6 round brush here. You can use whatever kind of brush that you like to get your washes. And I'm just going to drop some of the, I think this is either Sodalite or Indigo. I can't remember which of them. I'm just going to kind of drop it down and just let it go where it wants and do as it pleases, and just kind of learn about the color here and get a sense of how it moves. So really, this is just pure play. I just want to see how the colors work together. And then I'm going to drop my cerulean blue and the turquoise in the center, and then just kind of mix them around a little bit. And now I'll move on in a second. I'm going to make it a little bit darker on the bottom. I think I'm adding some of the Payne's Blue Gray here. Just a darker tone. And then whenever I want the pigment to be really dark, I'll just go back into my little wells there and get some fresh concentrated color out of the pigment. instead of using the mixes that I have on the right there. So still just playing a little bit, adding a little bit more colors, just watching the colors play. And then after we finish this large square, I'm going to speed up the video while we do the other smaller swatches. But I thought that because this is going to be our big ocean scene at the end, you might want to be able to watch in closer to real time how I got the colors the way that I did here. Because we're going to have a big wave on the bottom right, and then we're going to have a real foggy, overcast sky in that upper left-hand corner. And the way that I had done this for my other paintings, I just kind of swatched, and then when I was done with my swatches, I looked at the overall piece and then decided on what focal image I wanted to paint into the center at that point. So I really just let the swatches guide the finished piece. So, you know, I urge you to do it either way. Either just start with your swatches, or maybe you have an idea of what image you want to put in the center panel, and then you can add your swatches around that based on the colors you know you're going to use. Totally up to you. So here I'm mixing some lunar blue and indigo. And when these little panels dry, they're going to make these really, really beautiful, like stormy, cloudy skies, or sometimes they're going to look like, you know, just a real stormy ocean. So it's going to look like there's some waves and ripples and water. It's all going to kind of be very, very, very loose and abstract, but you'll definitely come away with a feeling of just like the ocean during a really, really big storm when the whole piece is finished. So now I'm just adding some indigo here, and indigo makes really, really, really beautiful beautiful storm clouds. And then just to brighten things up, I added some of the turquoise. And now we're going to try some turquoise and cerulean blue. Just a really real nice light little square there. And then I'm just going to keep working and playing. And the whole point of this is to see how the different colors kind of go together, how they move, how they flow, how they blend into one another. Just trying to get interesting patterns, not really trying to force things, just dropping color down and letting it go where it wants. So one thing you will definitely want to make sure you do is to wet the paper before you start applying color. This is a wet on wet technique that we're doing in this tutorial. So again, this square is just going to be just indigo. And I just love the different color variations that you can get in the indigo. And I think we're going to do the same right here. So I'm taking both the concentrated indigo from the palette and then also the less concentrated that I mixed up in those little wells on the left. And then to break things up, we'll add a little cerulean here, that pretty light blue, and some of the Sleeping Beauty turquoise. And now we're moving on to our last three squares. And because at this point I did know what I wanted to paint in the center, I knew I was going to do a ship on a stormy sea. So here I want these three squares to really look like they're kind of a stormy sky. So when you make your own swatch art, you could either try to have one continuous picture just broken up by the little squares, or you can have each little square be its own little color combination, just telling its own story. As long as you keep to very few colors, everything should match up pretty nicely and should go together well. That is one of the reasons why I use this pre-made Daniel Smith palette to do this technique, because I figured whoever put this palette together with these colors, they knew that they worked well. So when I was kind of playing around and trying to just come up with some color combinations, I knew that I was set up for success, that they were going to work well because it was a pre-made palette. All right, now let's draw our little ship. So I'm taking a fine liner brush here, and that's some neutral gray that I have on my brush. And I'm just going to draw like a little scoop so that we have the hull of the ship on the front, and then we have part of the body that's going to look like it's sticking out of the water. And then I'm just going to draw some lines straight up so that this looks like all those little pieces of the sailboat that kind of keeps it afloat. And then I'm going to connect the ropes. If you see that coming out from the hull, kind of coming in on a diagonal on both sides, and that's what's really going to make it look like it's a ship. And then I'm just going to add some little waves with my indigo with a pretty thin round brush, and then add some just little details with my black liner pen there. And as we get farther out in the ocean, you see those little waves are lighter and smaller. And we have that wave coming up over the front of the ship there. And now we'll draw some little seagulls in the distance. So it's just like a quick little quarter of a C on one side and then a quarter of a C on the other side. So just two little curves that are connected, kind of like the very top of a heart. Maybe that's another way to think of how to draw these little seagulls. And I'm going to make sure that they're different sizes. So the seagull that's largest is going to look like it's closest to us. And then those seagulls that are smaller and lighter will look like they're in the distance. And I'm just going to add some seagulls to these other rectangles as well that are around the boat, just to add some continuity to the scene. And then I thought I would add some waves as well. That's why I made those little black squiggles, and then decided didn't like that. So I'm just going to wash them out there. And I'm just going to blend everything together. And I noticed I had a little drip mark in the center, but that's okay. There's a lot going on this little panel, so we're not going to notice it in the end. It'll just look like part of the stormy sky. And now this is the really fun part we're going to get to in a second. We are going to take off the painter's tape just after I darken up those little seagulls. And to take off the painter's tape, just be very careful. That's really my only advice. Just go nice and slow. Try to peel the tape backwards on itself. And remember, this is pretty heavy duty watercolor cardstock, so it should be less prone to rip than maybe like a regular cardstock or a copic paper. And then when you're done, you get this like lovely little collage of just kind of oceans and waves, or swatches that evoke oceans and waves. And then you have your little scene in the center with our little boat that's kind of on a stormy sea with some little birds in the background. Here's the first version that I made. So these colors came out much lighter, and the little ship scene came out much lighter too. So if you want a lighter sky, you can follow those colors. If you want a darker, more stormy sky, you can follow the colors that I used in the tutorial, or the concentrations of the colors I used in the tutorial. And that's all I have for you today, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I really hope that you give this swatch art a try. It is so much fun to do. It's just pure play, and you will come away with a gorgeous piece. Have a great day, and I will see you again soon in the next video.